I want to have 2 more fights this year. Then after that, take off a little bit of time, maybe have a kid or something, and then come back and fight some more.
Me coming, it doesn't mean I'm not going to have time for the other kids. But it does mean I have a new baby and I have to focus and give that baby my undivided.
Always the light-skinned girls who think they just so pretty and just because they born light-skinned that they just all that. So they can come up with shit talk.
Like my best friend, I talk to him about everything, and when like the time is right, people want details of how long.
Y'all, absolutely no one was prepared for this. What began as a low-key night scrolling Instagram suddenly exploded into one of the most unsettling celebrity exposés fans have witnessed in years. No build-up, no PR spin, no warning, just Papoose hitting go live, eyes heavy, voice trembling, and delivering a sentence that instantly stopped the internet cold. I've stayed silent long enough. Within seconds, the comment section went nuclear. Tens of thousands were watching live, completely unaware they were about to see the public unraveling of Claressa Shields' carefully protected image.
Papoose didn't rant.
He didn't yell. That's what made it hit harder. He spoke with a calm that sounded like someone who had already cried every tear away off camera. He said Claressa was loyal only where the cameras could catch it, Instagram interviews, red carpets, public appearances. But behind closed doors, he claimed there was a completely different version of her. Then came the name that made people audibly gasp, her ex-fiancé. According to Papoose, while fans were being sold a picture-perfect love story, Claressa was allegedly maintaining a hidden affair with the very man she insisted was part of her past. And this wasn't gossip, he said. This wasn't hearsay. Papoose claimed he had receipts, messages, voice notes, videos, all allegedly saved straight from her phone. That's when the live went eerily silent.
Screens were shared.
Files appeared. Conversations allegedly exposing planning, manipulation, and one chilling reality. Papoose wasn't a partner. He was a shield. A recognizable face used for protection, optics, and industry safety, while genuine emotions were invested elsewhere. Fans watched in disbelief as Papoose said he caught them secretly meeting, attending fights together, moving like a real couple while playing him publicly. His voice cracked only once when he said, "I was used." And just like that, the live ended. No goodbye. No apology. Just silence, and a scandal that refuses to fade.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's the elephant in the room. I don't have to say it.
So, and the king can have many wives. He can have as many wives as he can take care of. And I don't believe in the white man's laws and regulations and marriage license, honey. If you a king and you able to take care of all your wives equally,
that takes time. Like it's a divorce. It's not something that just happens overnight. You know what I'm saying? But people's life don't stop because of that. You know what I mean? It's papers, it's time, it's all this stuff that gotta happen. But at the end of the day, we move forward with our lives. Like
I wish you the best.
For sure.
We got some great, amazing things going on. And like I said, it's my best.
Buckle up, because what played out didn't resemble a breakup at all. It looked like a controlled explosion. Late at night, when timelines slowed and defenses dropped, Instagram Live suddenly lit up with a familiar face that felt completely unfamiliar. Papoose appeared without a smile, without music, without build-up. No caption. No hype. Just a stare that made it clear this wasn't content. This was closure. Within seconds, the room flooded in. Screens started recording immediately. Comments flew faster than anyone could process. Something was about to break, and everyone sensed it. He didn't warm up the moment. He didn't joke. He said he had stayed quiet because silence once felt dignified, but over time, that same silence became a cage. According to him, what people adored on their screens was nothing more than a performance. The affection, the praise, the supportive captions. Those were public-facing acts. Behind closed doors, he alleged, the loyalty stopped. The relationship existed only where cameras could confirm it. Everything else lived in the shadows. Then the energy shifted. The pause stretched too long. He said there was a name people were never supposed to hear again. A past that never truly disappeared. An ex-fiancé who allegedly wasn't just history, but present tense. He claimed the affair wasn't emotional confusion or blurred boundaries. It was intentional, planned, sustained, hidden. The comments exploded, then suddenly fell silent, as if viewers realized they were watching a boundary being crossed live. What came next, according to Papoose, wasn't speculation. He said he had proof, not gossip passed through friends, not anonymous tips. He alleged direct access, messages saved, audio preserved, videos never meant to be seen. He described conversations where affection wasn't whispered, it was strategized. Where meetings weren't accidental, they were coordinated. Where his role wasn't partner, but protection. He claimed the narrative sold to the public depended on his presence to survive. He alleged that while fans believed they were witnessing real love, another relationship was being quietly nurtured in private. That the same ex-fiancé appeared discreetly, watched closely, stayed near. He said there were moments he could no longer dismiss. Patterns that didn't align. Absences that felt rehearsed. According to him, the realization didn't come softly. It hit all at once, and it hurt because it suddenly explained everything. He spoke about manipulation without raising his voice, which made it unsettling. He alleged the plan wasn't just romance, it was image management. He said being linked to a respected, recognizable name created insulation, that it softened hard questions, redirected scrutiny, and built credibility exactly where it was needed. According to him, he became a shield not by coincidence, but by design. The room went completely still when he said he'd been used, because the words didn't sound scripted. They sounded worn out. As the live went on, he explained how trust didn't disappear all at once. It broke down in fragments. How small doubts piled up until they became impossible to dismiss. How love, when weaponized, doesn't explode, it erodes. He claimed he first confronted the situation privately, hoping for honesty. Instead, he alleges he was met with deflection, promises that didn't match behavior, reassurance that couldn't survive evidence. He said the moment everything finally collapsed wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, a realization that truth no longer needed volume to be clear. He described seeing enough to stop guessing, hearing enough to stop hoping, understanding enough to stop pretending. According to him, that's when he realized walking away wasn't failure, it was survival. Viewers watched a man process grief, without theatrics. No tears on cue, no insults for applause, just a controlled unraveling that felt heavier than rage. He didn't ask for sympathy. He didn't ask to be believed. He spoke like someone who had already accepted what the public was only beginning to understand. Then he answered the inevitable question before anyone asked it. Why now? He said narratives were being rewritten without his consent. Silence was being mistaken for guilt. And protecting someone who allegedly never protected him felt like self-betrayal. He insisted this wasn't revenge, it was release. When the live ended abruptly, there was no sign-off, no final statement, just a sudden cut to black that left millions refreshing their screens. Within minutes, social platforms erupted. Clips spread. Frames were slowed down. Every pause became evidence. Every word became ammunition. Some rushed to defend. Others rushed to condemn. Neutral ground vanished instantly. What made the backlash so volatile wasn't just the allegations themselves, it was the complete absence of a response. No immediate denial. No clarification. No counter-narrative. Silence rushed in to fill the void, and in moments like this, silence speaks the loudest. Accounts went private. Comments were restricted. And the internet did what it always does. It reached a verdict before anyone else could. This wasn't treated like a lover's dispute. It was framed as a betrayal of truth, of trust, and of the audience itself. Fans who had invested emotionally felt misled. Skeptics felt vindicated. And somewhere between shock and disbelief, a reputation began to fracture. According to Papoose, the hardest part wasn't losing love. It was realizing love had been leveraged. That vulnerability became utility. That sincerity was repackaged as convenience. He said, when affection becomes strategy, everyone loses, even the ones who think they're winning. By morning, the story had taken on a life of its own. Headlines multiplied. Reactions intensified. Every outlet chased the same question. Was this a confession or an exposure? A man reclaiming his voice, or a scandal weaponized by timing? The answer depended on who you asked. And that uncertainty is what keeps the story alive. What's undeniable is this: once something is said publicly, it can't be taken back. Once doubt enters the collective consciousness, it doesn't leave quietly. And once a live stream ends in silence, the noise that follows is deafening. That silence didn't cool the situation, it sharpened it. What followed moved faster than any denial ever could. Screenshots multiplied. Clips were slowed down. Pauses were dissected like sworn testimony. Every second of that live became circumstantial evidence in the court of public opinion, and the jury had already convened. Within hours, gossip pages were stitching together timelines. According to online chatter, fans began connecting dots they claimed they'd overlooked before. Old photos resurfaced. Attendance lists from past events were suddenly treated like evidence. Comment sections overflowed with people admitting they always sensed something was off, while others confessed they had defended the relationship harder than they defended their own. That whiplash between belief and regret only fueled the fire. What made the fallout even more explosive was the claim that this wasn't a one-time mistake, but an alleged pattern. Papoose's words were replayed over and over, especially the line where he said loyalty ended the moment the camera lens stopped. Viewers interpreted that as more than infidelity. It was performance, a relationship curated for optics. In gossip culture, that distinction hits differently. Betrayal stings, but betrayal packaged as branding enrages. As reactions poured in, a narrative began to form, less about romance, more about strategy. Bloggers framed it as calculated image management disguised as affection. They questioned how power dynamics blur sincerity, how fame complicates honesty, and whether proximity to a well-known figure becomes protection or insulation. None of this was proven. All of it remained alleged. But allegations are enough when the internet speculates as one. Then came the pushback. Supporters of Claressa Shields argued that one perspective does not equal truth. They questioned motives, timing, and the ethics of airing private matters publicly. They highlighted the imbalance of power when one person goes live while the other remains silent. They asked whether evidence shown without verification should even be trusted. Their defense was vocal, but it struggled against the momentum of speculation. Silence became a character in the story itself. With no immediate response, the void filled itself. Accounts went private, comments restricted, and interpretation replaced confirmation. Comments were restricted, and every action, or lack thereof, was instantly interpreted as strategy. In the absence of official statements, speculation became reality. The internet rarely waits for due process. Meanwhile, the alleged ex-fiancé's name trended without a single word from him. His past interviews were revisited. Old posts were recaptioned by strangers. People debated intent without access, assigning roles in a story that was still unfolding. He was alternately painted as a manipulator, opportunist, or irrelevant distraction, depending on who was telling the tale. None of it was confirmed, yet to the audience, it all felt definitive. What gave the situation a courtroom-like energy was the way viewers spoke. They used the language of proof and motive. They argued credibility. They cited patterns. They questioned character. Everyone became attorney, analyst, and judge all at once. Facts were scarce, but conviction was overflowing. Papoose's demeanor continued to be dissected. Some praised his restraint, calling it measured and controlled. Others accused him of calculation, suggesting calm can be as performative as rage. The debate wasn't really about tone, it was about trust. Who earned it? Who lost it? And who never had it at all? Behind all the noise, something heavier emerged. Conversations began about emotional labor, about being present publicly while dismissed privately, about how betrayal doesn't always explode with drama. It often arrives quietly, repeatedly. According to the allegations, the damage wasn't a single moment, but a series of small betrayals that stacked until silence felt heavier than confrontation itself. As the day dragged on, reaction videos quickly eclipsed the original clip. Influencers dissected body language. The commentators spoke with authority they hadn't earned. Every retelling added layers of color, intensity, and assumption. The story grew teeth. What began as a single Instagram live transformed into a non-stop spectacle. Yet beneath all the chaos lingered a question that refused to fade. If the relationship was allegedly used as a shield, what does that say about a culture that rewards proximity over authenticity? Why does public validation sometimes outweigh private honesty? These questions hovered uncomfortably, unanswered, while timelines refreshed endlessly. By nightfall, empathy fractured. Some felt sorrow for a man claiming his trust had been exploited. Others felt outrage for a woman being tried in public without a response. Many felt exhaustion, recognizing the familiar cycle where pain becomes content. The tragedy wasn't just the alleged betrayal, it was how quickly it was consumed. Whispers of legal implications, defamation, and consequences circulated, but gossip rarely pauses for caution. The pace remained relentless. Each hour brought new angles, new takes, new certainty built on speculation. Truth became secondary to engagement. What lingered most was the emotional residue. The idea that love, when constantly displayed, can become transactional. That intimacy loses meaning when it's curated for applause. According to the narrative forming online, the deepest wound wasn't jealousy. It was being positioned as a prop in someone else's story. As midnight approached, the focus shifted from what happened to what would happen next. Would there be a response? A denial? An apology? Or continued silence? Each possibility carried weighty consequences, and the audience waited like spectators between rounds, bracing for the next bell to ring. The story hung in the air with pressure, reputation suspended, truth contested, and perception hardened. In scandals like this, damage isn't measured by what's proven, it's measured by what's believed. And belief, once fractured, rarely mends cleanly. What followed wasn't a statement. It was a seismic shift. The tone online shifted from outrage to anticipation, as if everyone sensed the next move wouldn't come from an official statement, but from pressure itself. Silence had already inflicted damage. Now it was forcing decisions. Behind the scenes, according to chatter, conversations were happening the public would never hear. Advisors, friends, industry figures, all weighing optics against fallout. In moments like these, denial can inflame, confirmation can destroy, and silence can harden into perceived guilt. The internet doesn't care which option is safest. It rewards whatever creates the most movement. What complicated matters further was the claim that evidence existed beyond what had been shown. Not everything had been revealed, and that suggestion alone became a weapon. Viewers debated whether restraint signaled responsibility or strategy. Some argued holding back proved credibility. Others claimed it signaled leverage. In gossip culture, withholding is power. As days passed, narratives solidified. Papoose was framed by some as a man reclaiming his voice after being used as a prop. Others painted him as someone controlling the conversation simply because he spoke first. Timing became the subtext of every argument, with every move or pause dissected and weaponized in the court of public opinion. Who speaks first often writes the first draft of belief. The alleged betrayal narrative began to expand. Commentators dug up old interviews, isolating moments that now seemed suspicious in hindsight. Compliments were recast as overcompensation. Praise was reframed as performance. What once looked like genuine affection was now interpreted as maintenance. This retroactive analysis shows how scandals can rewrite history without permission. Meanwhile, supporters on the other side cautioned against mistaking confidence for deception. They argued that public relationships are judged unfairly, that proximity doesn't automatically equal manipulation, and that being linked to a recognizable figure doesn't inherently mean exploitation. Their frustration grew as nuance struggled to survive the viral frenzy. The courtroom-like energy intensified. Every clip became an exhibit, every pause a tell. The audience demanded clarity while refusing patience. In this environment, truth isn't discovered. It's negotiated through volume. And the loudest voices aren't always the most informed. Beneath the spectacle, a quieter grief emerged. Not the kind that cries out, but the kind that settles. The grief of realizing intimacy can be transactional. The grief of understanding that affection can be optimized for engagement. According to the allegations, the deepest wound wasn't jealousy. It was erasure. Being present everywhere, but absent where it mattered most. Industry figures weighed in cautiously, speaking in riddles that sounded wise but revealed little. Some warned against airing private matters publicly. Others emphasized accountability. Nobody wanted to be wrong, yet everyone wanted to remain relevant. In scandals, commentary often reflects more about the commentator than the situation itself. Then came the backlash to the backlash. People questioned why audiences feel entitled to private pain, why consumption accelerates when heartbreak becomes content, and why empathy is rationed by allegiance. The discourse briefly turned inward before being swallowed again by speculation. What made this chapter feel tragic was its permanence. Screenshots don't fade. Clips don't disappear. Even if explanations arrive later, first impressions are permanent. Reputations aren't undone by updates. They're shaped by moments. And the moment that defined this story had already passed live, unfiltered, irreversible. Whispers of accountability beyond the internet circulated. Consequences that don't trend, conversations that never leak. But gossip thrives where confirmation is scarce. The lack of visible resolution kept the machine running. Every refresh promised something new. Every hour without a response amplified assumptions. Papoose's alleged finality echoed across timelines. The word done carried weight because it implied acceptance, not anger. Acceptance is harder to argue with. It signals closure earned through exhaustion. Whether people believed him or not, they felt the fatigue. And fatigue reads like truth to an audience worn out by spectacle. On the other side, the absence of a counter-narrative created a paradox. Silence can be dignity, but it can also be surrender to interpretation. Without balance, stories tilt. Without response, speculation hardens. Fairness isn't a currency online. As days passed, the scandal evolved from being about individuals to being about patterns, how public love is rewarded, how privacy erodes under applause, how simply being seen together can replace honesty. These themes resonated because they weren't unique. People recognized themselves in the margins. What no one could deny was the cost. Even if allegations were disputed, the damage had already occurred. Trust had been questioned. Motives scrutinized. The internet rarely reverses once it chooses a direction. It slows, it pivots, but it doesn't rewind. In the final stretch of his chapter, attention shifted from evidence to endurance. Who would outlast the cycle?
Who would speak last?
Who would be remembered as composed? And who would be exposed? These judgments form quietly, long after the noise fades. The tragedy here isn't just the alleged affair or the public unraveling. It's the realization that relationships can be consumed like episodes, that pain becomes plot, and that resolution is optional when engagement drives the narrative. In this economy, closure is less valuable than continuation. As the conversation cooled, it didn't heal, it settled, like ash covering everything evenly. People moved on, but the story didn't disappear. It stayed bookmarked in memory, ready to ignite again with the next development. This chapter ends not with a verdict, but with residue, trust altered, images reframed, and silence carrying consequences it didn't choose. Whatever truth exists now shares space with belief, and once belief embeds itself, it rarely asks permission to leave. That is the final weight of it. Not who is right, not who is wrong, but how easily intimacy became spectacle, and how quickly a private fracture turned into a public scar that won't fade quietly. This is where the story stops being entertainment and starts becoming uncomfortable. What unfolded wasn't a rumor whispered in private. It was a public fracture that cannot be stitched back together. Whether you believe every allegation or question every motive, one thing is undeniable. Once something this personal spills into the open, there's no clean exit. If these claims are even partially true, this wasn't just a breakup. It was a calculated collapse of trust played out in front of millions. And if they're not true, The damage caused by perception alone proves just how brutal public judgment can be. Either way, careers don't walk away unscathed. Images shift. Alliances crack. Silence starts speaking louder than words ever could. The tragedy isn't just betrayal or exposure. It's how quickly pain becomes content, how fast loyalty turns into sides, and how easily real people become characters in a story the internet feels entitled to finish. Everyone involved will carry this moment long after timelines move on to the next scandal. So the question isn't who won or lost. The real question is, what happens next? Will there be receipts to counter the claims? Will silence continue to harden into assumption? Or will the story take an even darker turn once more details surface? Because stories like this rarely end where people expect. They pause. They wait. They resurface when least anticipated. And if you think this chapter was explosive, remember, the loudest fallout often happens after the cameras are off. Stay alert, stay critical, and never assume this is the final word.